We should be live now.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the Subcommittee on Net Energy Billing with the Energy Utilities and Technology Committee. This is a subcommittee where 4 of us meet to discuss possible changes to the net energy billing program that is currently in process. And just to refresh people's memory, at our last meeting, we had I had thrown down the gauntlet of asking everybody to, or at least the sides, to come up with some ideas on where we would draw the line and where we would begin setting markers in the NEB program for grandfathering people in, and also for setting up an NEB2 program. So I'm going to just ask people to kind of do their presentations. I'm prepared to do one on behalf of Nicole and I think either Trey or Steve, you might be prepared to do yours. The purpose of this discussion is, this is not where we are, but the purpose of this is to stop talking philosophically about what we want to do with NEB and begin to put some actual numbers down so we can get some reactions from the industry, reactions from the GEO, reactions from the PUC, and begin to have a substantive debate with the goal of reporting something out so the legislature can get it done by the end of May, and we will know, give certainty to the people in the NEB process. So Trey, do you want to go first?
Sure. And I will need a little bit of an assist at some point from the PUC on figuring out some of the specifics, but in talking with Steve and others in our caucus and trying to figure out what proposal would make sense to bring back to our respective sides that will actually receive some support and be able to, garner at least a significant majority of votes within our caucus. We've come up with the following proposal. So the first part is with regard to, I guess, grandfathering or safe harbor. The date which we feel would be the best, starting point, certainly I think is probably pretty close to where we draw the line, is the date at which the IOUs would have been at 10% of the peak load would have been generated from the NEB projects. And so that's the part that we'll need a little bit of specific information from the PUC on with regard to when those when the utilities got to that point. That way we can back into that date. From a high level, the other components which we feel would be important to include, one is a revision in the contract periods, so going from 20 years down to 10 for future,
to clarify,
future projects.
That's prospectively?
Right, that'd be going forward, correct.
Okay.
The other changes would be an elimination of distributed generation projects going forward, and then a shift in NEB projects to 1 megawatt as the cap or the maximum size. We feel that latter one will incorporate some of the interest in preserving rooftop solar projects. The intent isn't to do away with them, but we don't feel like there is much of the problem as the distributed generation projects in terms of what we've seen from exploding rates. I'll defer to Steve or Representative Foster to make sure I didn't miss anything there. Is that pretty much where we're at, Steve?
I believe so. We had the 10-year from the 20-year term that we wanted, and the other items, I think, as it's well known, some of us have our own bills in that we thought would address this problem in our own way. So some of this is a bit of a stretch for us from those initiatives, but this is something that at least Trey and I think we could get behind and try to salvage what we can out of this without costing the ratepayers even more money going forward. Then I think, you know, going back, and I don't want to go back and rehash things, but we anticipated some costs that we thought were going to be difficult for ratepayers, and I think we can all agree that it came in. Those came in more than what we even anticipated. So I think we do need to address this, and we hope this is a compromise that our folks can get behind, and certainly that you can as well. So I think Trey covered pretty much everything.
Thanks, and I appreciate it. And I actually talked to Trey a little bit about this ahead of time, and we may end up in different places, and we may come out with 2 reports. But I appreciate what you guys have added to the conversation and some of the ideas you came up with, because I think they are very valid ideas and very good ideas. And I think we have similar goals, as we want to minimize the impact on ratepayers, while at the same time honoring those who are in the process. So I'll kind of lay out what I have proposed. It follows a similar format to what you guys are thinking about. It has different dates and different cutoffs, but what I'm thinking is grandfathering in projects as of the date of December 31st, 2020 that were in the queue, and we have to develop the markers for what it means to be in the queue, with the goal of having grandfathering in 900 megawatts of power proposed. And my choosing of the 900 megawatts is going off the 750 figure we're kind of talking about, that if there is an attrition of 25 to 50%, that's going to get us somewhere between 450 to 700 megawatts of distributive generation in that process. Then setting up, as you guys have suggested, an NEB2, and grandfathering all projects prospectively under 1 megawatt under the existing NEB program, so they could still qualify for that. The ones from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatt, what I was thinking is setting up directing the PUC to be able to set the term and the rate, the percentage of the standard rate offer, that would get us to, instead of a number of 750, a percentage of the electricity consumed in Maine to be coming from DG, and that we would determine what that percentage is as part of this process. And also putting in there some other criteria that the PUC could use to determine priorities, such as giving priority to people who have already in the process but did not qualify to be grandfathered in, giving priority to location value, nonprofit status, maybe even something like small business markers, like if you're operating under a small business loan or an SBA loan or something like that, to give some kind of priority. And those, I would suggest, are to be determined and to be discussed. And the one different thing I had was an idea that we direct the PUC to develop a program for DG with storage, to create a certain number of DG with storage over the coming several years. And I chose randomly a minimum of 25 megawatts up to 50 megawatts of DG with solar, and that projects that we had grandfathered in could apply for that, could edit it, edit their project and add solar to it and qualify for the add-on. And if they decided they didn't want to go ahead with DG and solar, they would not lose their place in the regular grandfathering of DG. And priority would also be given to projects that didn't qualify for grandfathering, but were now in the queue in another fashion and converting their project to solar and storage, and that the PUC would have to determine an appropriate add-on to get us a minimum of 25 megawatts of DG and solar. So those are my thoughts, and those are the thoughts from Trey and Steve. And I guess I'd first start out by wanting to hear some reaction from the PUC and the GEO.
Thank you, Senator Lawrence. In terms of the Republican proposal, the dates I think you're looking for CMP hit the 10% mark or notified us of that on May 20th, 2020. And Versant crossed the 10% threshold on September 15th, 2020. In terms of the Senator Lawrence, your proposal, I'm a little unclear on what is qualified under the safe harbor as of 12/31/2020. And it sounds like maybe that's still being developed. Is that correct?
Correct. And I think what I'm going off, Phil, is the numbers you gave us. There seem to be different ways to look at what qualifies. But what I'm trying to focus in on, what can we use for markers that get us to approximately 900 megawatts grandfathered in?
Okay.
And I'll probably task you and Dan with coming up with some answers for me.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just have some more questions to Phil, but that's helpful explanation. We can certainly provide some numbers with that date of kind of, one thing that comes to mind is what we presented last week is the NEB agreements. As of the end of last year, there's 1,300 megawatts, and so some kind of additional pieces would need to be set there. But we can certainly provide a little bit more info there as needed.
Yeah, I remember the figures. We heard 2,400, then we heard 1,200 or 1,300. Then you came in with some numbers that were somewhere around 700 or 900. So I'm just kind of looking to you guys to give us some markers where we maybe could choose to get us to somewhere around 900. Any other thoughts before I go to the people in the attendees list to provide any reactions they would want?
I mean, I'll just note that I think that what you're, a number of things have sort of would kick to us, and I think everything I've heard is workable, just as long as we develop, obviously, what the legislative criteria, what criteria you'd like us to use.
Yep. So thank you, Phil and Dan. I'll turn to people in the attendees list. So if you want to add anything in, please, or register a reaction, please raise your hand.
Senator Lawrence, if I may.
I can see we've left everybody speechless. Nicole?
Thank you. I was like, I've got my hand up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say before, I really appreciate both sides looking at this, and I do want to try to respect, to the extent that we can, and I think we can, the letter that our chair sent out June 25th, stating that it was not our intention to implement retroactive changes to the projects already in the queue at that time, and that we would maybe provide modifications to the program, but they would be applied probably after 2020. So I do think that was a date in which there was a statement made to the business community that we are looking at this, we plan to look at this. If you are already engaged with an investment, that we honor that, but that there will be changes. I just wanted to bring that up. And I am very enthusiastic about working to sort out some of the positive improvements we could have for net energy billing 2.0, as we're calling it, to make sure that the benefits really are coming to the grid and the operations based on locational values, for instance. And finally, I would say that it is definitely my interest to keep ratepayers' costs down, of course. because this transition won't happen unless we can keep rates down. Otherwise, people will not want to switch to electricity. So to the extent that I know there are members, people, experts out there beyond our small group that can help us think about softening any such increases in rates, I want to be open to those proposals as well. So I think there's a few different projects happening at the same time, and I'm glad we've got some stated values to start from, at least out there. And I'm looking forward to honing in on the details of those 3 different aspects.
And I think if I remember right, Nicole, didn't Rick Silkman have some suggestions on things that might be done to soften rate impacts as we switch over to a renewable electrical supply?
Yes, he did. And I think he sent a memo to the Public Utilities Commission indicating some of the options that he saw that I think we were also, this committee was sent, or the EUT committee was sent the version of. So I've looked at it briefly, but I haven't delved into it, but it's that sort of concept that I'm interested in
Great.
looking into more. Thank you.
So you're welcome. So I see we have the first victim from the attendees list who wants to jump in and enter their 2 cents. So if, Jordan, if you could beam David Costello over. And Jeremy Payne too. David, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, hi, Senator. I'll hold off from commenting on the date and the megawatt target until after I've heard from the industry, which I may want to weigh in a little further. But one thing I would say in terms of the possible markers and criteria that you've cited for your megawatt target, you might want to consider, and we've submitted, a few environmental organizations have submitted some language. I know at least to Representative Berry, but it relates to again, the citing from an environmental perspective. It takes language already in the DG procurement or language similar to DG procurement, which would say that, sites on brownfields, landfills, those, and, pervious surface or already disturbed land might be criteria that the PUC and GEO could use as they try to narrow that list down. So I would just say, I would refer to that as sort of environmental citing. And again, the language we could provide with more specific language if interested, or at least the PUC and GEO, although I think they have that language. Again, it's pretty much the language that's already in the GG procurement.
If you could provide that language to Deirdre, David, and then she will share it with the subcommittee, that would be good.
I'll do that.
Thinking of that as a criteria for the 900.
Well, that's what I was thinking. If you're going to use criteria, or if the PUC and GEO is using criteria, that's criteria they could consider using. Obviously, it's something we'd like to see going forward and in any 2.0 program as well. But it just to throw that out as a possibility for as they sort of vet projects. And I'll hold off on the megawatts because I'd love to hear what Jeremy has to say. Yep. And maybe I could come back later based on what he has to say and if others have comments on that. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, we'll leave you in the participants and while Jeremy is speaking, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Jeremy, I realize we've caught you by surprise, so this is off the top of your head, but we wanted to start throwing some things out so you guys could kind of begin to react.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I guess I have probably many more questions than I do actual really well-informed reactions or responses. I'd want to know, just for starters, on the Senator Stewart, Representative Foster proposal, how many megawatts are included at the May 20 CMP September 15th version territory? And then Senator Lawrence, on your proposal, and I wasn't sure if Representative Grahowski was part of that too, so my apologies if she is and I'm not referencing it correctly. I'm not sure I understand how you're going to get to 900 megawatts. I mean, if you're safe harboring everything that's in I'm guessing you mean the interconnection queue as of December 31st.
I don't really understand how you're going to back down 900 megawatts and how you're going to decide who's in or who's out. Ultimately, you're going to have to make some sort of determination using either having an NEB agreement in hand or having a fully executed interconnection agreement. So I don't know how you're going to do that to get to 900 megawatts. I'm just not understanding if you're using December 31st as the date.
I can answer those questions as we go on. And so, this is more to get your input on, thoughts and ideas about this. So I don't have those markers, and that's what I was talking about, the PUC and the GEO to look at and say, what markers could we use for a 12/31/20 date that would get us approximately 900 megawatts.
And so, Senator, when you say 900 megawatts, you're not saying 900 firm, you're saying start with 900 and then base attrition off of that, and we land where we land after attrition. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, I mean, if we're assuming a 25% attrition or somewhere around there, I mean, you're basically, I guess, below what the original bill called for. So I think that's a really confusing signal to send to the marketplace. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we should have sent a signal about 6 months ago, 12 months ago, ideally 18 months ago. I mean, I'll give you maybe just a reaction generally. I mean, we were going to bring forward a specific proposal to safe harbor 1,500 megawatts, 1,250 solar only, 250 solar plus storage. And frankly, even at 1,500 megawatts, that was still going to be wrecking a bunch of projects that have spent real money in response to this. So the fact that we're sort of starting at 900, and again, I don't know off the top of my head where Senator Stewart and Representative Foster's idea comes down in number of megawatts. Maybe they do, or maybe Chair Bartlett does. But I think what you can do in order to maybe get more comfortable around attrition is also to put in some project milestones. So things like you have to reach commercial operation by some date in the future. You could say by the end of 2024. You could say you have to have municipal permits in hand by the end of 2021. I mean, I think when you start to layer on those project milestone considerations, that's when you're going to start to see attrition go up and presumably achieve the goal that you're in pursuit of, which is to reduce the size of this program. I also just want to, again, mention something I've mentioned previously, is that I really think you need to include some consideration for good cause exemptions. There have been a bunch of problems that have occurred throughout the interconnection process associated with, in particular, CMP. These things that are completely out of the control of a developer who very well may have had a project ready to have a fully executed interconnection agreement as early as last summer. So those types of projects should be able to petition the PUC for a good cause exemption and get themselves safe harbored. Certainly don't expect that to be hundreds of megawatts. I don't know how many it's going to be, because I don't frankly know how many people were harmed by dates being missed or problems along the way. I think we can safely say it's not going to be hundreds of megawatts, maybe a couple dozen at most, but I'm frankly just guessing. But then the other piece is providing some visibility into what is the future program going to look like. I know we sort of touched upon that briefly, but I think, tasking the governor's energy office, obviously in consultation with the PUC, with convening some stakeholder group this summer to examine, create recommendations for a successor program. I mean, those could be governed by picking a specific target of megawatts per year. And maybe what you want to do is kick it out a couple of years. Maybe what you want to say is, we're going to develop an NEB 2.0 that procures or allows into the program 250 megawatts every year, but starting not until 2024. So you allow this process of NEB 1.0, the permitting process, the interconnection process, the attrition to play out a little bit. And then you have some visibility into, all right, well, what did we get in NEB 1.0? But you're also sending a signal to everybody who has already invested, hey, don't abandon your projects. There is going to be a successor program, and it's going to look at, again, fill in the blank number of megawatts. I would advocate for 250 megawatts per year. But then you can also build the successor program, build in some cost control measures. So things like allowing the conversation to include consideration of what is the C&I tariff rate now, and then doing a discount off of that. So for all of those, you know, small, medium, and large businesses that have struck NEB deals with solar companies, that's got a specific dollar figure attached to it, the tariff rate. So NEB 2.0, you could base the future program off some discounted rate from the tariff rate. So, and then it could ratchet down each year. So maybe it goes down by 5% in 25, 5% in 26, 5% in 27, 5% in 28. And so you've got, you know, a 20% reduction by the time you end in 28. But, you know, I mean, no big surprise, whatever number you all choose, I'm going to ask for more. I mean, there's just too many companies that have spent too much money in response to the signal that you all have sent. And I just cannot, in good conscience, say that I think 900 megawatts is a reasonable landing spot. I think it has to be higher than that. I think you have to be in the 4-digit zone. It's just, we've got a real problem on our hands here if we sort of pass policies, people respond, spend a bunch of money, and then people get skittish, and then we say, oops, we're going to look backward and, you know, hamstring projects. I understand you've got to be cost conscious, and I totally agree with what Representative Grahowski said, particularly as we're considering beneficial electrification. We cannot create sticker shock with our policies so that people don't want to make that transition. However, at the same time, we're going to need new clean energy supply. And so the sticker shock for consumers is real, but so is the business uncertainty and lack of clarity that we're creating if we're just going to safe harbor 900 megawatts. And also there's going to be attrition on top of that 900. So anyway, that was a lot. I'm sure I'll have more to say maybe as you continue your conversation, but I don't want to occupy too much more time. And I'm certainly happy to try and answer any questions any of you may have.
No, that's good, Jeremy. And that's the kind of reaction we need to get. And part of me pushing into this point is to start to put down numbers, start to put down ideas and get reactions. So I appreciate that. And I especially like your ideas about good cause exemption, setting in some very real deadlines and things like that. And I kind of want to hear back from you guys on those types of things as a way of increasing attrition or something like that, or getting through the projects we really, really want to get through. So I don't think, I mean, you may not like the 900 number, you know, and I'm certainly open to discussion of how we could structure that differently. But we wanted to get something started. And I realize reacting on the spot is very difficult for you. So part of the process I'm going to suggest is that we give people over the weekend to kind of absorb it, kind of come back and begin to tinker with these ideas and see how close we can get to getting something that we think is workable. On the NEB2, I think what you were describing was essentially what I was describing, and maybe I didn't do it in the right terms, but the development of that NEB2, which is, and the rate could be on a percentage is what you suggest. The one difference I think I suggest is not putting a hard and fast number of how much NEB we want in that second phase, but to tag it to a percentage of the overall electricity consumed in the state. And so that number could increase as we shift more people over to using electric in vehicles and homes, then that would stimulate a need for more distributive generation. And we would certainly want the input of the industry on developing that NEB2 program and what it should look like.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to say, and may have word saladed my way into confusion, was my hope is that when you task, or I hope you will task the Governor's Energy Office with convening the stakeholder process, I think you need to give them very clear directives of what you want them to bring back to you. So when the stakeholder group is meeting this summer and fall, whenever it may be, that we're all sort of rowing in the same direction. What are we actually trying to achieve? Whether it's a specific set number of megawatts each year or a percentage of the state's retail load, I think we need to have pretty clear directives of what it is we're trying to accomplish. Otherwise, we're going to bring back, or what could be brought back to you all is a whole list of options. And I'm not sure that's all that helpful next session. So, you know, as much clarity as you can provide to the Energy Office or the PUC or whoever is going to be running the stakeholder process, so that, they make sure that the mandate upon that group is clear, that we all know what we're trying to bring forward, the best, fastest, cheapest number of megawatts or percentage of load, just so we all know what's expected.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. David, did you have any reaction you wanted to give?
Well, I'll be very brief. I very much appreciate what Jeremy's just said, and I won't get into the discussion about megawatts. I think that's obviously a challenge. I certainly think he's right that the number is likely to be north given attrition of 900 megawatts. But again, I don't really, I'm not an expert. I can't really comment on that. I certainly confident that the commission and GEO will come up with a good number that the committee can work with. And I very much appreciate what he said and what you've said about 2.0. And I certainly think, Senator, what you just said about the percent of sales, setting that target as we expect load to increase. I think that's a very good point. And certainly the way Jeremy talked about layering on as GEO and the PUC vet these projects. I know it's going to be tough, but I certainly think that those parameters, the criteria they use, I think is very appropriate.
Great. So questions for Jeremy or David? Nicole?
Thank you. And apologies if I missed it, but Jeremy, I did appreciate what you said about thinking about milestones. And if you have drafted or could draft some examples, specific proposals about what those might be, I think that would be really helpful for us to see.
Be happy to do that. I'll send that over for sure.
Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here. So a comment and a question. A comment is, I think we made it fairly clear when you mentioned that the signal we all sent. Some of us made it fairly clear in the 129th, and again with bills we introduced in the 130th, the signal we were trying to send. So I think that was fairly clear to the industry and all involved. But second, the question I have for you is there any, do you think there are any of the folks that you represent that didn't understand the situation as far as PUC overview of this, and especially in regards to when we reach the 10% number? Do you think that wasn't clear, or did people just think that was not something that would have any effect?
Well, candidly, Representative, I think if the message was intended to say, hey, developers, don't spend money after this, then it should have been a cap. It was a 10% threshold which triggered a study of the PUC. It wasn't a 10% threshold triggering everybody stop spending money. And to Representative Grahowski's point, and admittedly, there was just 2 signatures on it, but the co-chairs of the committee said, we're going to be looking at prospective changes. That's our goal. We're not going to look to make retroactive changes into 2020. So, I think you and I, if or the average person, Representative Foster, would continue to spend money investing in whatever the industry would be. If you get signals from the chairs of the Committee of Jurisdiction that you're not going to make retroactive changes, why wouldn't you continue to make investments? I mean, it would almost be fiscally irresponsible not to pursue viable sites and projects and the ability to provide savings to homeowners and businesses. So I hear what you're saying. I mean, candidly, there's always a minority report, right? There's always a losing side on, well, I guess there are some unanimous bills, but we pay attention to what's in the public laws, right? Not the minority reports. So while some people expressed their concern about the size or cost of the program 2 years ago, cat's out of the bag, right? The public law is the law of the land, and those are the rules of the road that people invested under. And I just think it would be irresponsible reputationally for the state. And this is not just about DG solar or even renewable energy. The reality is businesses won't invest here if we're going to make retroactive changes, period, full stop.
Thank you. So I would take from all that you just said that had the election gone just the opposite in November, you probably would have had a little different outlook on this at that time.
The presidential election?
I think he was making a joke about the
I'm
legislature
talking about the state of the state.
Oh, I see.
had change
Well,
of party
candidly,
control and the legislature changed in the November elections.
honestly, Representative, no, I wouldn't. I would still say that the legislature should stand behind the laws it passes. And if you want to make changes, obviously prospectively that's the prerogative of any legislator, any legislature. Maybe I wouldn't have been as successful this session. I don't know. I guess it depends on the perspectives of those who might have won, but I don't know.
Thank you. We'll see. We're not done yet, obviously.
Any other questions for David and Jeremy? Okay. And we do have over in the attendees list, Caitlin O'Neill, who would like a chance. So if you could beam Jeremy and David back and beam Caitlin over, that would be great, Jordan. I'd appreciate it. And anyone else who wants to chime in, feel free to raise your hand. Caitlin, go ahead.
Thank you, Senator. Frankly, I'm supporting the gist statements that Jeremy was making. And I would encourage, as I appreciate the fact that you have put out, some firm dates, some firm megawatt thresholds that we're able to react to and respond to. And both Jeremy and I will be talking to our members to provide you some constructive and critical feedback. I think the challenge is it's at this point, we just have a larger threshold of projects that have pretty significant investment. If you just look at that 12/31 date, there are about 1,300 megawatts that have signed NEB agreements. There are also about 1,250 megawatts that have signed interconnection agreements. So that is just using that date threshold, for some comparison of how many projects have actually achieved that state of advanced development. And even as we speak, NEB agreements are continuing to be signed. And some agreements that were just signed last month are being presented to projects that started the development process and investment process, in some cases back in 2019. And just the interconnection process has taken some time. So, Jeremy has said, we'll provide some feedback on, what milestones can be utilized. I would want to reinforce and reiterate that as we're looking at how we're setting milestones for projects to be considered to be safe harbored, to focus on development. I think incorporating policy goals into the 2.0 discussion is going to be really important. And I think that'll really help drive that conversation in a big way about what types of projects we want to see built, where they're sited. Are we looking at low income benefits? Those are all going to be really critical to that conversation. But since they weren't included in the initial rollout of NEB, to sort of apply that screen to projects now would be to determine which projects fall into NEB 1.0 would make it more challenging, and is there were no prior signals given to the market to pursue that avenue, which I'm sure many of them would had they known that was a priority. So just wanted to kind of highlight that point. Policy related goals, critical, and they're going to be crucial for really gearing that conversation, so we have a clear direction and path forward. But I would encourage, in terms of milestone setting, to focus on development related milestones.
Good. And I think we would have some certainly agreement with you on developing those policy milestones, and I look forward to kind of your and Jeremy's reaction or thoughts, ways we could look at things differently as far as setting that grandfathering threshold, grandparenting threshold, I should say, in there to be gender neutral. Great. Okay, any questions for Caitlin? I see Tony Buxton has his hand up, so why don't you beam Caitlin back over and beam Tony in?
Thank you, Senator Lawrence and members of the committee. Tony Buxton from Pretty Flaherty on behalf of the Industrial Energy Consumer Group. And I want to thank everyone on the committee for their hard work so far and the hard work you have left in trying to decide how to draw lines in this circumstance. I want to emphasize that IECG has taken responsibility publicly in front of your committee for whatever role it played in getting us to where we are today. And we are eager to be helpful in regard to solutions. In fact, IECG made the argument in front of the law court on behalf of a variety of environmental groups and others in defense of the principle of net energy billing. So it isn't the principle, it's the particular program that we're dealing with that had no role in it for the PUC. So with that, let me comment on the proposals as I wrote them down as fast as I could. First, in regard to the Republican proposal, I think it makes a good point about the 10%. A sophisticated investor, and these are virtually all sophisticated investors, should have read the statute and undoubtedly did, and knew that after 10% there was a risk. The risk would have been that there would be legislative action eventually that would say that was enough. The number wasn't meaningless. Secondly, as we've pointed out, the NEB contracts do not obligate the developers to actually build, and they have no penalty for not building. In fact, they really are, in a sense, an option to build. And if you build, you have to start building within a certain period of time or you lose out. But if you build and you operate, you get paid. That's very much unlike the rest of the power contracts the main PUC has ever approved. So these are different. And despite the arguments of others, the equities are not quite what they suggest. You have every right to decide that there is a need for constraint and for credibility in the future, and to protect, as Representative Grohosky has said, the very important principle of moving to beneficial electrification. In regard to Senator Lawrence, your proposal, I'm not sure I caught it all, but if I get this wrong, please correct me. Your target of 900 megawatts is a start. We would say that your suggestion that there may be, I think, 400 or 450 megawatts of attrition is, we think, overly optimistic. And if you really expect that, then we're going to try to figure out a way to suggest to you some kind of mechanism that gets you to the number you most felt comfortable with in suggesting that much attrition. The reason there will not be attrition is that many of the smaller developers have been bought up by hedge funds in Maine. The Carlyle Group has purchased one of the bigger developers, and Carlyle has billions of assets. BlackRock is buying up, and BlackRock has $9 trillion in assets, according to its website. I can't even imagine all those zeros. So basically, unless someone has really screwed up and has an interconnection problem or an I-39 problem, they're going to be able to build their project, and they're going to cost us 14 cents for 20 years. So the rate increase that you're talking about with 900 megawatts is approximately 18 to 20%. And that is not an insignificant number. In fact, it is, to my knowledge, unprecedented. So if you would like a lower one, then the criteria that you set as you go forward, as you finish your work, need to be very specific. For example, the NRCM's proposal is an interesting idea and not a bad idea at all. But it's hard for you to estimate the impact of that. And that suggests that you delegate more of this to the PUC. I realize you don't want to give the whole thing to them, but the more you give to them, the more likely you are to achieve your objective. And I would point out, as you have pointed out, Senator Lawrence, that there is a future. If someone has done the homework to do a project that doesn't make the grade because we had to cut back, it's a project that might be developed in the future if it's useful to the citizens of Maine. And for that reason, we would urge you to be, more specific about your 900 and what the actual attrition rate is going to be. If it's, 5%, that's a very different impact on ratepayers. The next thing I want to suggest is that you consider, at the very least, allowing the commission to establish a buyout program. The commission has the ability to figure out how to do that. I realize the commission itself is a little wary of it because most of the people there have not done it before, but it has worked, and it can diminish the impact, the rate impact, and it even could result in replacement of people if there's a need for that. And it's an established process that we've used to protect ratepayers, and it's not clear to us why that would not be useful. The last thing I want to say about all this is that there's been a lot of discussion of safe harbor. It is difficult to describe this current circumstance as a safe harbor for consumers. It is a lot closer to Pearl Harbor than a safe harbor. The fact of the matter is, this is not what you intended to have happen. It's not what anyone in the legislature, I believe, intended to have happen, and it's entirely appropriate for you to act. We don't want to harm anybody either, but on the other hand, when a program like this is so popular that it raises questions about the lack of limitations on it, it may be time to re-inject the commission in some way to help you achieve your objectives. We look forward to the opportunity to provide comments and to continue to try to be helpful.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Buxton from the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you. You can beam him back, Jordan. Is there anyone else in the attendees list who wanted to weigh in? I see Eric Stiniford from the PUC. Eric? Whoops, maybe he disappeared. Nope, there he. I'm sorry, Eric from CMP. I'm sorry.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman Lawrence. Thank you. That was a lot to absorb in a very short period of time, but I'll offer some initial reactions. As we stated in our testimony, we think there is an obligation to honor the commitments that the state has made toward those that have invested a lot of money here in the interest of fulfilling state policy objectives. So to the extent that we are going to have an attrition process that tries to winnow down wherever that line is drawn to get to some target objective, to the extent that we can rely on traditional business risks that developers face to accomplish that attrition, rather than, let's say, more arbitrary, legislatively imposed mechanisms. Things like, relying on risks of local permitting, risks of the interconnection process. What we're seeing now, we've only had about 500 megawatts that have made it through the full study process, including the transmission level studies, and received all of their authorizations to proceed. There is a tremendous amount of additional capacity that is still in that pipeline. And I think it is reasonable to expect that, particularly when it gets through the transmission level analysis, there will be many projects that simply won't be built because the cost of the required upgrades is going to be significant. So to the extent that we can allow that process to play itself out, and that the developers who have invested are eliminated based on the types of business risks that they accepted when they went into this process, and not rely on artificially imposed constraints from legislative action that I would argue, shouldn't have had to anticipate. I think that would be beneficial. And we're certainly happy to work with the commission and other interested parties to develop those.
Thank you, Eric. And that sounds very similar, and I appreciate your willingness to help in that. That sounds almost similar to some of the things Jeremy Payne was saying, and that giving deadlines for people to achieve certain things at certain dates may increase some of the attrition and separate the wheat from the chaff, if you understand what I mean in the process. So this is where your technical expertise, I think, will be extremely helpful in helping us come up with some of those ideas.
The only other issue I just wanted to touch on briefly, Senator Lawrence, is I know there was reference made to the competitive energy solutions paper that was provided to the commission about softening the impacts, the rate impacts of this policy. I would hope you've also read CMP's response to that proposal, and if you haven't, we'll be certain to make sure that the committee has seen it. We think it's a process that we have tried before with some not very favorable consequences, and we would urge that we explore other alternatives rather than having the investor-owned utilities shareholders finance this for an extended period of time with a promise to be paid back later. That is not a structure that we would recommend or support.
And I appreciate that, Eric, and certainly that's a topic that's going to take place not in the process of this NEB discussion, but kind of more long term.
Understood.
Yep. Nicole, did you have questions?
My question was, I did see a little bit of the utilities reaction to that proposal, but did you have a counter proposal? Do you have any ideas that are concrete that you can share with us at some point?
We'll certainly give that some thought, Representative. I think, generally speaking, our view is that if this is a public policy initiative that was developed through legislation in the way that it was, that perhaps there are other ways of publicly funding that policy rather than putting it on electric rates or on the utility shareholders.
Any follow-up, Nicole? And I do see Eric Feigenbaum, excuse me, Eric, I butchered your last name here from Versant. And I wondered if he might or somebody else from Versant might be willing to be beamed over and kind of give us a perspective from Versant if they have a similar perspective as CMP about being able to work with us to come up with some criteria to, develop business, more of economic conditions that would, begin to increase the attrition rate. Eric, raise your hand if you're there and interested in coming over. Okay, why don't we beam Eric over? So Eric, I realize you're not the technical person with Versant, and Eric is more of a technical person with CMP, but you heard what he said. Is this something Versant may be able to help with too in developing some criteria?
Absolutely. We'd be more than happy to continue working with the GEO, with the PUC and the members of the subcommittee and the full committee to help come up with any additional information about our experience with NEB and sort of where different benchmarks along the way, what that would mean for various consequences of the program.
Okay, is there anybody else in the attendee list who wants to add something in?
Senator, if I might, Dave Norman from Versant is also in the waiting room, I believe. And if you did have any technical questions, he's one of our top engineers, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them now or at any time in the future if that's useful.
Okay. Do you want him to come over now to see if he has anything technically he wants to add?
If you don't mind, I think that'd be helpful if you're willing.
Okay, let's beam him over. Hi, David.
Hi there. Assuming you can hear me then, Senator Lawrence?
I can hear you now.
Excellent. So just wanted to say that it won't be without technical impacts to go to above 10%. When you have that kind of solar penetration of intermittent resources like these solar resources, you end up in a situation where you have to have reactive power support and voltage controls that don't exist today. California has to give you some idea, California has a penetration of solar right now at about 55%, and we are certainly aware of the issues that they had last fall with some blackouts during what's called the transition period. As the sun is setting, solar generation's dropping off, you have other resources that have to take their place. At the same time, people are coming home, starting up the oven and microwave and so forth. The load goes up at that point in time as well. And so that's a difficult transition period. More and more penetration you have at solar, the more you have to deal with that transition. So there's simply more technical challenges, technical resources, technical equipment that has to be put into place to deal with that. And that's effectively more storage. So I just wanted to make that point.
Good.
We will have to deal with that reality, that physics reality, which is my job, think about the physics. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I think that's some of the area where I could certainly use some technical help and understanding, where I say in my proposal that we get to a certain percentage of DG. I'm not talking about 55% between DG and grid scale. That is way beyond what we're talking, but also in kind of what would be the impact on the entire electric grid if we had this much DG, this much grid scale solar, this much wind, this much offshore wind, and kind of how can we mitigate some of those things with the use of storage and those types of things. So that's where your technical expertise would be very, very helpful in our understanding that. Steve?
Glad to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mr. Norman, for being here. Quick question, I think. When it comes to those types of issues, do CMP and Versant, in your case, do you deal directly with ISO New England as a T&D when those types of issues are coming up? In other words, an increase in solar penetration, or is that something that we rely on the PUC or others to monitor and work with them on? Because
we work in concert. Sorry.
Yeah, obviously they have a great interest in that area. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Foster. Yes, we work in concert with ISO New England and CMP to talk through these issues and how we get there. To give you some idea, the current net energy billing percentage for our area is, at least if you look at net energy billing contracts that are signed or pending, is right around 76% of our peak. And so it is a substantial amount. Hard to say how many of those projects will come to be, but we do have to think about that moving forward.
Other questions for David? Steve, you want to continue?
Well, if I could, that brings to mind a follow-up. So, Mr. Norman, when along with that, Versant, CMP, and ISO, I would assume are also looking at how do you manage your acquisition of backup generation. You talked about the need for more storage, but at this time, especially as we move further into the amount of solar that we're utilizing, your backup generation for when that's not available, is that something your engineers also look at with those same groups, or how does that come into play?
ISO New England is looking at and responsible for the resource adequacy of looking at ensuring that we have the backup sources. They work in concert with us. We also look at things from a circuit point of view, a distribution circuit point of view, to make sure that we can control the voltage. When you have a large generator, a large solar generator on a circuit producing 4.99 megawatts during the day, you might have too high a voltage, so to speak, and have to control it down. As the sun sets, goes away, load picks back up, it goes the opposite way, the voltage drops, we have to control it back up. And so those are the type of things that we're looking at. We work together, ISO New England and us, to ensure that the system is under control. ISO more from, as I said, the resource adequacy point of view, and the transmission circuits, us from the distribution circuits, and work with them on the transmission circuits that we have control over.
Other questions for David? Thank you, and we really appreciate you chiming in on your expertise, because we are not technicians. We are not engineers, with the exception of perhaps Representative Foster, who probably has some of the most technical knowledge, and Representative Grohowski, who have some of the much more technical knowledge on the committee. Lawyers like Trey and I are very in the woods instead of in the weeds.
Thank you. Happy to help now and in the future.
Good. Okay, Jordan, why don't you beam those two back over? So what I'm going to suggest going forward, and I'll just need a nod of heads from Trey and Nicole and Steve, if you think this, is that we task Phil and Dan to work with Jeremy and CMP and Versant and Caitlin to start to push some flesh to our proposals and see what the numbers would really mean, and what would be coming in and what would coming out, and what the criteria Jeremy was talking about is, and come back to us next week with a little bit more substance to what our proposals would actually mean. And certainly if Dan and Phil have questions, they should feel free to contact either myself, Nicole, Seth, Steve, or Trey, the rest of this week or over the weekend, to figure out what we're actually looking for to put kind of some substance to our proposals. Does that sound good, Nicole?
Yes, and I do think that sounds good. And, we're trying to solve, I think, the impacts of NEB 1.0, but I am thinking about the 2.0 transition. And I wondered if Commissioner Bartlett could help me remember. There's so much going on at the PUC, and I'm sure I've asked poor Garrett this question a million times, but how were the processes going with the sort of modernization inquiry, and when we can, because I think that the results of that are going to be really important to net energy billing 2.0 and actually getting DG in places and storage in places where it matters. So I wonder if you could give us an update on how it's going, and like when that might have results to funnel into our work.
So we are just at the early stages. We had to put out an RFP to get engineering consultants on board. That process has closed and the bids are being reviewed right now. So I expect we'll have somebody on board fairly quickly. I think we'll have hopefully some meaningful updates for you when you come back next year in January. The process won't be anywhere near complete, but I think at that point we will hopefully have at least some initial assessments from our consultants and be able to define hopefully a little bit better for you the timeline.
Thank you. And this time I wrote it down.
Great. So Phil and Dan, do you have any question, or do you understand what I was talking about helping us fill in some of the details of these proposals?
I think so. I think we'll be in touch if we have questions as we get into it a little bit. But I think so.
Okay. Deirdre, when are we looking at, how do our lives look next week as far as schedule? And do you see like an hour or two opening for NEB subcommittee?
That's a loaded question. How do our lives look next week? I mean, you have session on Wednesday. We don't have a firm schedule for Tuesday or Thursday at this point. So
EUT does not?
It does not. So I would guess, just on some ideas, that Thursday will probably not be a good day. So, but I also think Tuesday could be an awful long day as well. So I don't, a long way of saying I have no idea
So
what might work or not work.
why do you feel Thursday might not be a good day?
Just because some things that were planned to maybe be done next week.
Oh, okay. You're talking about a couple of bills that were thought to be scheduled and things.
Yeah, just things that nothing's firm. So, I mean, obviously, if we go in a different direction, it'll be easier. But where we don't have a firm schedule yet, it's hard for me to say what might work.
So some of the options are we could put something on Friday or maybe Wednesday afternoon, hoping that session, we can escape from session a little. But how is the subcommittee feeling about how soon we need to come back?
The only feedback I could give you at this point is that Friday I am not available, but we could do something either Thursday afternoon. I mean, is Deirdre getting the sense that Thursday is going to be
It could be a long EUT day.
Okay. I mean, what is the plan for Tuesday? Is there any?
I mean, right now, there's a lot of things in motion and a lot of things unknown. And I mean, there's a potential for us to have, I think, somewhere in the way of 10 to 12 work sessions on Tuesday and a couple public hearings. Again, none of this is solidified and there's conversations that need to happen with me and the chairs of the committee. But our work sessions generally are not that rapid moving. So if we're having 10 work sessions or 12 work sessions, that could be—
That's a piece of cake, Deirdre.
Unless we could just have all the ducks in a row and walk in, you kill all 10 or 12 or something, then,
or table
it's hard for me to predict right now because there's so much uncertainty in what next week looks like.
So my suggestion is we just claim some time on Tuesday, which sounds to be like the best day. My question for Dan and Phil is, do you think you'll could have anything substantive for us available by then?
Well, something.
Yeah, we can have an update maybe.
I just kind of want to keep the ball moving, realizing that the industry needs to get some kind of certainty. So we need to begin to flesh this out. So I'm going to claim 3 o'clock on Tuesday as mine for the subcommittee, Deirdre. And no matter what Representative Berry tells you, that's ours. Okay, does that sound like a workable plan, guys?
I would say that's very workable, Senator, if you chair the committee that day.
Now. Okay, so let's adjourn until Tuesday at 3 o'clock. And may keeping with our beaming topic, may